opportunities for work in the future. When we talk about the future, we don't mean future in the long run, but rather the future that depends on everything we do today. That's why we have experts, academics, and important stakeholders of social and solidarity economy gathered here today at a global virtual platform to talk about inclusive and sustainable local development. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you should know we have language interpretation. The plenary session that we're about to begin will be held in 3 languages, Spanish, English, and French, and that's why you now see on your screen different ways to access language interpretation, whether on the phone or on your PC, regardless of the operating system you use. If you're on your PC, on the bottom of your Zoom window, you should find an icon with a globe. On your phone, look for the menu and then click on language interpretation to choose the language of your choice. We also have the chat box here in the platform in case you want to communicate with us. So any questions or comments, you can write them on the chat box. As you know, the GCEF Global Virtual Forum is made by all of us, and that's why we have our guiding question in all 3 languages. We will be sharing this question in the chat box as we reach the conclusions. And we want to invite you to share your thoughts, contributions, questions on the chat box as well. And finally, you can also follow our live stream on Facebook in all 3 languages. To find that, you can visit our website, www.gcef2021.org. gcef2021.org. We'd like to invite you to use our hashtag GCEF2021 in all social media. This is also important in order to track everything going on in our event. So welcome once again. In the framework of the GCEF Global Forum, we have gathered together important actors from around the world of social and solidarity economy to share best practices, innovative ideas, and solutions to guarantee inclusive and sustainable development for all. It's an honor to have you all with us. We'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Mexican government, on behalf of the organizing committee, and on behalf of GCEF. Before we begin with a video, which will give way to our session, I'd like to share some thank yous and acknowledgements to everyone that made this global forum possible. We would like to thank the GIZ and Sparkas Foundation. And now our video.
Las nuevas tecnologías están cambiando las reglas del juego.
La humanidad experimenta cambios sin precedentes y grandes desafíos en el mundo del trabajo. La digitalización está brindando nuevas oportunidades a partir del surgimiento de nuevas ocupaciones laborales.
No obstante, las brechas son amplias. El acceso y uso de las tecnologías de la información y comunicación no es universal.
Hay personas excluidas de los beneficios de la era digital y otras más con el temor de verse sustituidas por el avance tecnológico.
Es un llamado para que los diversos actores involucrados sumen esfuerzos y convoquen a asumir responsabilidades para generar condiciones de trabajo justas y equitativas, para un mundo mejor en transformación.
Bienvenidos a la era de la nueva digitalización y el futuro del trabajo, retos y oportunidades.
Okay, so for Mexico, it's truly an honor to be welcoming you in this global virtual forum. I want to leave you with our moderator, Marisol Fernandez Alonso, Director of Social Investment at the Nacional Monte de Piedad. She has had a long history of success. She has worked in PR and she was a general director of her own business for 3 years. She represented Mexico in the Madrid government and in several international organizations, and she was an expert in a program for collaboration between SMEs in Europe and Mexico. She studied Economics by ITAM, and now she is creating the social investment strategy in Nacional Monte de Piedad. Thank you, Marisol, for moderating this panel. I'll turn it over to you, and I wish everybody a very successful plenary session. Thank you, Tomas, and welcome all of our participants and all of our panelists who will be sharing all their thoughts and experiences with us. Before introducing you, I'd like to share some context about GCEF. It's an international association of local governments, local networks, and civil society associations that are committed to social and solidarity economy to guarantee sustainable and inclusive local development. GCEF promotes different forms of social economy, including cooperatives, mutuals, foundations, and self-help groups that prioritize people instead of revenue. GCEF believes that systemic changes begin locally based on the partnership between civil society, the public and private sectors. It's based in Korea, and two co-presidents, the mayor of the city of Seoul and the representative of civil society networks. By July 2020, GCEF had 25 members from all 5 continents, coming from 35 different countries, including 26 local government and 35 networks and actors coming from social and solidarity economy. In 2021, it's an honor to say that Mexico and Mexico City is the first to host GCEF in Latin America. In 2020, because of the circumstances we are going through, the global forum is happening virtually, with the goal of articulating visions from all over the world of social and solidarity economy, as well as to discuss important topics to face our current situation. In this context, with such a relevant topic, as Tomas has already said, it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers for today's plenary session and explain how the session will be carried out. We have with us Soledad Aragon Martinez, Secretary of Labor and Employment Promotion for the Mexico City government. She has worked all through her career to studying work. She's an expert in labor. She has been a researcher, professor, and she has trained trade unions as well as represented Mexico and international institutions. Welcome, Soledad. Our second panelist is Ollane Aguirregoitia. She works for the Department for Public Services, Civic Engagement, and Internationalization from Bilbao, Spain. Welcome, Ollane. Our third panelist is Baudouin Collat. He's National Director for the Research Center for Social Entrepreneurship and Social and Solidarity Economy, CERES. He has international recognition for his commitment to promoting social and solidarity economy in the world, but particularly in Africa. He was invited by the United Nations to participate actively in an international workshop about the role of cooperatives to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Welcome, Baudouin. Our next guest is Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister in charge of social innovation. Audrey is renowned for revitalizing Perl and Haskell digital languages, as well as creating Ethercalc on online spreadsheet in collaboration with Dan Rickley. Welcome, Audrey. Our next speaker is Enrique Peñaranda. He's Director of Innovation and Digitalization for the Spartcasa Foundation. He studied business administration in Pierre Mendes in France, in Grenoble. He has a master's degree in international risk management and another one of international management by the University of Lyon. Welcome, Enrique. And we also have with us Beatrice Allen. She's Executive Director and Secretary of the Board of Chantier de l'Économie Sociale, as well as co-president of TIES, an organization that allows transfer of social innovation regarding social economy that leads to territorial development in Quebec. She's also a member of the board of Chantier de l'Economie Trust, which supports businesses of social and solidarity economy. It's an honor to share a panel with such distinguished guests. We will have 3 rounds of questions for all of our panelists. At the end of each round, we will wrap up with a conclusion of our guiding question. Our first 2 questions for the first round are the following. I'd like to ask you all, what are the opportunities offered by digitalization for the future of work? And what is the role of government in terms of strategies and public policy to promote social inclusion? Soledad, let's start with you. Thank you very much, Marisol. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'd like to greet all my fellow panelists and particularly all the participants and people listening to us on the social media. This topic relates to the working conditions that many workers around the world have had to assume as a consequence for prevention measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Without a doubt, this pandemic has accelerated the digitalization process of many areas of production. Occasionally, special emphasis is placed on the new future that will come to us because of digitalization, and that may lead us to forget that we're in the middle of a process that began many years ago and that is here to stay. It's also easy to forget that even if not in the same measure, for decades, labor markets as well as skills and abilities of workers have been changing. And this is important because we can learn from our recent past, especially in how we have coped with accelerated transformation in the labor market. The characteristics of our time leads to changes happening at an unprecedented rate. As I have already stated, this pandemic has done precisely that, accelerate transformation. When I think about this question, what are the opportunities offered by digitalization for the future of work? Before beginning to think of future scenarios, I would suggest looking to our past. This is important because from several analytical standpoints, we might think that there could be a total destruction of work. Or, on the other hand, people think that it will be utopia, that digitalization will solve all our problems. And that's not true. Let me think about the recent past, 1977, before the internet. Citibank installed its first ATM in New York. It wasn't the first of its kind, but it was the beginning of the massification of that service. At the time, people said that that would lead to the end of banks and that many jobs would be lost. Now we know that banks did not shut down and that there are still, and that many people were not replaced, but rather this was a new tool that helped to complement the services that existed. This type of automation has led to bringing financial services closer to remote locations, and that led to new jobs being created both directly and indirectly. So current work and work of the future in the short and long term can benefit from digitalization. First of all, and this is something that the pandemic has accelerated, is that remote work is here to stay. Of course, it still needs to be regulated. Workload at home needs to be analyzed. An adequate balance between work and family life and many other topics that have yet to be discussed. We have currently identified, we have lost the speaker. I apologize. Her digitalization needs to be taken advantage of globally. The speaker's microphone is muted. Can you hear me? Yes, this will allow us, once we overcome the pandemic, for private companies and government institutions to implement schemes that combine remote work with office work, which will bring benefits in terms of reducing the number of people in office spaces, times of commute, the fuel used, and it will lead to better productivity. Digitalization has also allowed for a lot of progress in terms of online training and education. One of the conclusions of the report presented in 2019 about the future of work is that to open the door to new opportunities for human development, it's essential that workers have a right to learn permanently and to receive training permanently. This is of the essence for people to take advantage of new technologies and new work opportunities that are emerging, but also for workers to become actors of transformation and not only expect changes to happen to them. Together with that, digitalization is making knowledge more democratic, more universal. Thousands of people around the world are innovating and starting new businesses by being self employed or establishing family businesses. The opportunities offered by the internet, social media, and phone apps have allowed for very successful and innovative businesses to be created with little investment without needing to have a space to operate in or production plants. I could talk about many more opportunities that digitalization will bring to the world of work, but at the same time, I'd like to talk about challenges that will come with this technological change, which is affecting negatively the life of many workers. And I think this is related to the second question about the role that governments must play in terms of strategies and public policy to promote digital inclusion and take the best possible advantage of digitalization. I believe that the first thing governments need to understand is that not everyone in society has the same tools to adapt to digitalization in terms of knowledge and skills, but also in terms of access to infrastructure and equipment. There is a great inequality gap, and if it is not addressed in an integral fashion, millions of people will be excluded from the benefits of digitalization. With that in mind, I'd say that one of the main challenges of digitalization is to close knowledge gaps and skill gaps, but at the same time, guaranteeing an inclusive digitalization that doesn't lead to greater inequality when it comes to facing challenges. Now, what governments need to do is take on this responsibility. The Mexico City government is taking this challenge head on, and we are trying to address this problem by reaching many different sectors of the population that used to be marginalized and that are part of vulnerable groups. I'd like to say that any actions and measures implemented by government will have to always prioritize people. Otherwise, social and economic gaps will continue to grow, and that, of course, affects social peace and well being. I am convinced that only with inclusive social contracts will technological development lead to prosperity for everyone without any exclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Soledad. Now I would like to give the floor to Oyane Arinegoita. Thank you very much, Marisol. And first of all, thank you to the cities of Seoul and Mexico for giving us the opportunity, for inviting me to be in this panel and to learn from the experiences of all my fellow speakers. I'd also like to say thank you to GSEF and the local organizing committee for organizing this event. It's an honor that Bilbao could be represented in this panel. We are currently in the middle of a transformation. The world and society are being affected by the consequences of COVID-19, and cities had been looking for new opportunities to change. And now the pandemic has also come to show us that cities are the first to be affected by difficult situations. And that is why we must become leaders to overcome these difficulties through interinstitutional collaboration and coordination that aim to achieve inclusion, economic regeneration, employment generation, and social cohesion. So these are big challenges that require a lot of courage to address them. Digitalization is a process that needs to be a part of everything we do, but we also need to do it sensibly, sustainably, and respectfully, considering the needs of people, which are constantly changing as well. In our case, when we talk about urban governance and how it is promoted by digital tools, we always do so trying to protect the environment and to protect our citizens. Digitalization, we believe, will improve and optimize our workflows. And some examples I could give you of that are, for example, improving productivity by taking better advantage of human talent, by creating an ecosystem and promoting collaboration instead of competition, customizing products and services in a much more easy way, offering 24/7 customer service, having very agile digital services that can serve the 4.0 industry that is much talked about, having hybrid jobs, hybrid intelligent jobs where virtual and face-to-face activities are complemented by mixed schemes with humans, with intelligent machines, with artificial intelligence. And we will also start having the participation of Generation Z. They are much more motivated by the impact, the social impact of their job than their wage, as long as their basic needs are covered, of course. So these are, I think, the opportunities that digitalization offers. But we must also consider the impact that COVID-19 is having when it comes to the adoption and implementation of technology. It's being accelerated and it's being deepened. To share an example that we recently experienced in Bilbao, we have remote work. In the city hall during the lockdown, we had about 1,500 people working from home. And we had to make changes for that to guarantee security, both physical security and data protection. And the truth is that before the lockdown, we had about 50 people working remotely. So that shows the change. We have also had to change organizational and leadership models and how we relate to our teams, or organizations that were always very result oriented instead of process oriented had to change their perspectives a little bit. And I agree with something Soledad said, that jobs don't necessarily need to be lost because of digitalization. Rather, what we have seen in Bilbao is that the opportunity with leadership and vision is to take advantage of new jobs that can be created and that will be created. Many new jobs will be created, but that also poses a great challenge. We have to take advantage of those jobs, but we have to guarantee that they are inclusive and that they don't widen the gap. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. Oyane. Now I'd like us to hear from Baudouin. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentations of Soledad and Oyan. My name is Baudouin Kola. I am a representative from Togo. And I want to say thank you very much for the invitation to be here and congratulations for organizing this event. I'd like to talk to you about our experience. I'd like to not only talk about our experience, but also about our hopes for the future. We are currently going through a particularly difficult situation in Africa. The speaker is breaking off. We apologize for that. Before this new digitalization era, I think it's important to acknowledge that we are now facing many challenges. A vast amount of Africans today has around 20 years old, and by the year 2050, 30% of the global population will be African. This has economic implications. I come from a developing country in Africa, which faces many challenges such as migration. Our population faces a lack of opportunities, and that's why they go looking for those opportunities abroad. I feel very proud of how Togo is reacting. It's an honor to work for the National Commission of Youth Employment, which is an institution that helps the government to work on the strategy that we have for job creation in Togo. Many events and activities have been organized face to face to talk about the difficulties of unemployment. This year, because of the pandemic, we have transitioned to digital trainings as well, and that allowed us to reach many young people in the country who we hadn't been able to reach otherwise. And now we will be accompanying them by supporting their projects. In Africa, digitalization, I believe, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for education, for employment, for training, and human relationships. Many people today don't really have access to training and education, especially in rural areas. It is difficult to have access to training when people live in far off locations. So, digital tools offer an opportunity to solve these problems. So, coming back to the question asked by the moderator, what role should the government play to guarantee better access to digital tools? How can we make it a part of our daily activities? Sometimes access to internet is not the best. In urban areas, there is good internet access, but in other places, this connection is weak. So the government needs to make an effort to improve the digital infrastructure available in the country to make sure it is available all across the country. There is still a lot of work to be done to achieve that. On October 14th, an event was organized about public services in the country. And this topic was addressed. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. We will continue talking in the next rounds. Thank you very much, Baudouin. Now I'll turn it over to Audrey. Thank you.
In my personal opinion, the most important thing here is intergenerational solidarity. Whereas the younger people, the digital natives, understand the idea of worldwide connectivity and worldwide collaboration, the older people has the wisdom of making sure that the new ideas are feasible and could integrate with the social norms instead of disrupting the social norms in the name of innovation. So in Taiwan, we have this idea of reverse mentors, people who are under 35 years old joining the cabinet to reverse mentor the existing cabinet members who are often older than 35 years old. I'm 39 now. So I work with my young reverse mentors who shows the direction of the planet, who shows where are we going, to make sure that there is intergenerational solidarity, and the older people realize their ideas, making sure that there's sufficient resource and sufficient support, and so on. So, for example, the reverse mentor for the Minister of Labor proposed a couple years ago that we need to attend the World Skills competition worldwide and highlighting the champions in the Taiwan National Day parade, just like Olympic athletes. Well, not only it's the case last year and this year, but also for future years, because people now understand that if we highlight the capacity of the World Skills champion, it's not only bettering their individual careers, but also making sure that they can be introduced to the K-12 education curriculum and work with younger people who are even younger than they are, and to build the community to make sure that there is a ergonomic, inclusive park and schools, buildings, and all sorts of community development targets, then the even younger people learn that there's a ladder of skills that they can work with those champions, have someone they can look up to, and then instead of just academic achievement, they can see it's actually those immediate solidarities across the various generations that can connect them all the way to the Minister of Labor as well as our Premier, our Prime Minister. And so I think just showing this intergenerational solidarity is led by the younger people. I think this is one of the most important points in this new condition of intergenerational solidarity. In Taiwan, we have this national strategy called DG Plus, or DIGI, where we break down the digitalization into 4 components. The first one, D, stands for development of infrastructure. The second is I for innovation. And third is G for governance. And the fourth and the most important one to me is the second I for inclusion. Indeed, we have seen that digitalization have brought tremendous amount of innovation in terms of how we can move beyond the space and time boundaries and engage in work relationships with people who are in literally different time zones, who are working across many different disciplines, people previously constrained by their mental or physical handicaps and so on can be assisted by assistive technologies and integrate into a larger world-scale economy. So these are the opportunities. However, the opportunities are not without its drawbacks. For it is through algorithms and code of text, that's the regulations, and also code of machines, that's the algorithms, that regulates the intermediary relationships of those new configurations of work. And so, as with any algorithmic governance topic, we really need to hold two things to account. One is whether this digitalization platform for the future of work is aligned in its value with the workers. And the second is that if there is a mismatch in value alignment, can the workers take the means of intermediation to our own hands? And in open source software, we call it forking the intermediary platforms so that we take control of the platforms that dispatches the kind of communications and links offered by the internet. Indeed, the internet itself, as evidenced by the end-to-end innovation principle, offers precisely this kind of freedom. If you do not like any particular internet protocol and how it works, one can fork a different protocol without consulting or seeking permissions from previous attempts at decentralization. So the World Wide Web, for example, did not ask for permission from Gopher, and the newest iterations of, say, the Ethereum distributed ledger did not ask for permissions from Bitcoin. And so this kind of value alignment and workers' control, I think, are the main opportunities as provided by an open internet in the governance mechanisms toward the future of work.
Their vision and their experience. For the Sparkassen Foundation, it's very important to have this type of allies that help us structure knowledge and strategies for the future that could help develop all of the topics that are being touched on this very important forum. I would like to try to answer all of these very significant questions in the next couple of minutes. However, before that, I would like to emphasize the importance of this work in the social and solidarity economy. This development model, this organizational model, is putting people and work first at the center of what we do. The contributions that people can make to development at a local level, and therefore for the regions and countries respectively, is key. Therefore, everything that is related to work should be considered a foundational element for analysis. And of course, the future of work, now that we have so much digitalization and technology, needs to be reflected upon constantly, and reactions need to be prepared. Having said that, I would like to answer the question about what the future opportunities for work are, and I would like to give the most concrete answer possible. So not all people are going to have the same opportunities if we consider today's stage of development in our own countries. There are also a few figures that could be useful to explain this idea. In developed countries, more than 80% of the households have a computer, they have a device, and in developing countries, that number goes down to 36%. And in the less developed countries, which are 44 countries around the world, less than 10% of families have access to a computer or a technological device where they can work. So we can see here that there are many infrastructural limitations besides what my colleagues already mentioned about lack of access to the internet and communication networks. So these opportunities are extremely limited. And it's also worth pointing out that 13% of the world's population is illiterate. So analyzing those figures, we can come to the conclusion that it is necessary to work in a very coordinated way to be able to give these populations the opportunity of enjoying the benefits of digitalization. So I would not like to And on a sad note, a negative note, on the contrary, I would like to say that we firmly believe that digitalization is a great universe full of opportunities, and it will all come down to the level of planning that we make in order to make the most of all these opportunities. Now that we mentioned planning, there are many elements that need to be considered, but I am going to focus on the 5 main elements, in my opinion. The first of which is education or training for all. The second is focus on innovation, and then also infrastructure, which is extremely necessary. And fourth place, we have the need for a legal framework that will also include work and digitalization. And in fifth place, we have ethics and supervision. I'm going to start talking a little more about education, which is the first of my elements. Of course, I don't think I will have time for all of them, but I would like to emphasize education. If people are at the core of social and solidarity economy, then education is a key element. We currently need to ask ourselves if the existing educational systems that we have for elementary education, upper education, and ongoing training for workers actually meet the requirements to build capacity and skills that professionals will need in order to work in a digital world. And I need to correct myself because I am saying they will need in the future, but actually they need those skills and capacity today. For us, it is very important that training systems and educational programs for all need to support the acquisition of key skills such as critical thinking, creative thinking, a mindset that will allow them to use information to make decisions and go from memorization-based educational systems to a more hands-on approach. So when it comes to innovation, it's also very important to understand that digitalization for most people around the world is not about creating technological tools. It's about knowing how to use those technological tools so that through them, it will be possible to promote more value and add more value to people, their work, and the organizations within social and solidarity economy. We need to understand that digitalization is not about technology for people. It is about training and about culture. These are all elements that need to be approached very patiently. These are very long processes that will take time. And this is when we have to involve several different stakeholders. And now I'm getting the time warning, of course. Thank you. So we need to think about all the elements that this encompasses. The first thing that we need to take into consideration is cultural change, because digitalization nowadays offers a wide array of options for training, but the work system also needs to regulate all of the trainings that will take place. And that way, innovation can also be correctly channeled, correctly planned for, and so we will have a framework that furthers innovation. Infrastructure was already mentioned by my fellow panelists, and the legal framework is, of course, of utmost importance. It needs to be updated in order to defend workers' rights and regulate working conditions among peers. And ethics, of course, are a key element for all of us. Within this educational system, and this is my personal opinion, I believe that in a highly digitalized world, societies need to invest more on humane issues and the humanities like philosophy, history, sociology, because we must add values to the mix, because they will help us create technologies that favor and benefit people and societies and not against them and their initiatives. Thank you very much. Thank you, Enrique. Now I will give the floor to Beatrice Allen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. One of the challenges of speaking after several really interesting speakers is that I feel like a lot of the things I wanted to say have been said already and probably better. When I think about the digitalization of the future of work, I think there are opportunities. There's opportunities for there's more data. So there's opportunities for more informed decisions and for faster processes. And there's also an opportunity to reduce certain menial jobs. And I think that that's important for the well-being of all. This being said, I think that there are major issues, and without surprise, I think they reinforce or can diminish issues that are already there in our economies and our societies. The first one is increasing economic inequality, not just, well, between individuals, but also I think between countries. So that all the questions around the ownership of this technology, who's reaping the benefits of this? Are we having a few enterprises, owners, countries that hold all of the data and hold the capacity to develop new things and own all of the technology, so the capacity to reap all of the economic benefits of its use? And to that, I think that the governments need to be thinking about ownership, about conditions of data use. Oftentimes here in Quebec, a lot of the data is generated by public services, our health services. How can we give access to this data to enable research, to enable platforms, but in a way that's respectful and that of private privacy, but also that redistributes any profits or uses of that to the community. We also need to look at conditions to commercialize research. In Canada and in Quebec, research is subsidized through grants, but most of the benefits of that are privatized. And I think, again, this is an issue of collective good. And to go back to my earlier point, I think we need to be thinking about this in Canada as it regards Canadian citizens, but we also need to be thinking from a global perspective, because we're seeing a polarization of this technological progress in terms of its economic impact. I think also one of the issues is with more and more data is understanding that not everything that's important can be quantified, and not every basic skill basic activity could or should be automatized. There are a lot of, we need to be looking at biases, we need to be looking at impacts that might be acceptable in one place are not in somewhere else. And so that calls on government to look at the conditions of use of data, to look at the impacts of decisions that we're making through digitalized processes, and how do we appeal them? How do we discuss them? How do we look at possible biases? And particularly with a focus on social inequality. So one of the issues, and we've been talking about it, of working from home, what does that mean for women when they have now a double or a triple social charge of looking after elder people, children, and providing at work? But the same way, we've seen studies in the US showing that disadvantaged, and particularly the Black community, is disadvantaged through algorithms that assume through the data available that they are more guilty, more vulnerable, more et cetera. So my other point is that a lot of data doesn't always mean complete information. And this is really important then to integrate actors in the field. So the social economy has a long history of being involved, of mobilizing actors in the field to answer their own needs. They have an expertise in not only knowing what's happening in the field, but in engaging participants who often are further away from broad national decision points. And so they should be around the table when we're talking about developing new technology, operationalizing this technology, looking at the impacts that it's having. Are they what we wanted to achieve, et cetera? They need to be around to discuss it and to think about the problem, but also to govern the ongoing processes. And lastly, and I think we've talked about this as well, the question of inclusion more broadly. Internet connectivity is a huge issue in Quebec, in that we are technically a more developed place. There are areas in Quebec where there is no access to internet. And if we're going to move towards these kinds of models of working from home, learning from home, going to school, doing all government services through the internet, that means excluding a whole group of population, and particularly rural areas. And so we need to be looking at different ways of meeting that. In Quebec, there's a couple of initiatives of different business models, including supported by the local governments, municipalities, to have co-ops to provide that internet service. We also need to have training to reduce the tech divide because, as was said by other panelists, elderly people have a difficulty in keeping up to date in new updates, but also people who've been formed narrowly for a function or who have literacy issues, or who've been formed, our whole history of education has been moving towards teaching for a function rather than teaching for a capacity to analyze and adapt. And I think we need to be thinking about that as well, but also supporting those who need to be continuing to work in a context where everything is being revolutionized. So hopefully we are up to the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. We have finished the first round, and I think the contributions were very valuable. And so now we're going to talk about opportunities of digitalization, democratization, access to education and training. And simultaneously, now we are facing significant challenges because inequality gaps can become even larger if the communities that have less access to technology are not included. There were also very interesting insights about the need of infrastructure development, innovation, and governance. And of course, digitalization should be sustainable, inclusive, and should not only respect people, but should place people at the core. Our panelists have also asked our viewers to think about the ethical values that should govern digitalization. And they talked about the importance of intergenerational solidarity. And we also need to think about whether the educational system that we have right now is meeting the needs that we have for inclusive digital transition. Now we are going to move to our next question. And I would like to remind you all that this live broadcast is available at www.gcef2021.org. So if you wanted to promote GCEF in your social media, the hashtag that you can use is hashtag GCEF2021. The name of our forum is very important. It is the power of community and social solidarity economy for transformation, to create a path for transformation. So the greater the challenge, the greater the solidarity. Many people are with us here in this panel, so let's start with the next question. Each of our panelists will have 2 minutes to answer, and the question is the following. What are the good practices of social and solidarity economy for the creation and maintenance of decent jobs in a digitalized context? Go ahead, Oriana. Okay, thank you very much, Marisol. Well, here at the Bilbao mayorship, we believe that remote work and flexibilization of work models and new hiring systems lead us to believe that the key for all this is talent, not geographical proximity. So this allows companies to attract the best talent despite where they live. So we need to promote having diverse teams in order to prevent discrimination, and this is very important for corporate responsibility as well.
This is key for training, capacity building, and the development of solid infrastructure, as one of our colleagues was mentioning before, like having a good connection. And it is also related to social responsibility and ethics, which means diversity in a broader sense. Something else that's extremely important is the transformation of human resource models. This is going to be increasingly important over time, and it's beyond human resources, it's human management, people who work in organizations. This is very important to ensure that quality is provided through work, and it's also very important for professional development and healthcare. We want to promote emotional, psychological, and physical health for all workers. In our local example, it's something I would like to share with you because it's what we've done through COVID. We set aside a budget for social and solidarity economy, and among the measures that were implemented during the pandemic, and all of this was politically agreed upon, one of the measures was to increase the budget that is set aside for social solidarity economy initiatives. And we also believe that this model helped us deal with COVID much better and provided more job stability. Thank you very much for inviting me once again. Okay, thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Baudouin. Go ahead. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And well, I also believe that the stakeholders creating the strategy are extremely important. We need to have more impact in decision making. Our model is very interesting, I believe, but we are never going to be able to change anything if we don't make sure that we include all stakeholders in the decision-making process. It is true that we can have an influence, we can be privileged partners for several African governments. For example, in my case, that is what happens. But we need to make sure that we are going to have a real impact in the actions that are taken. We are going to have a real influence so that changes are made at the local level. And I believe that this is the best strategy, it's the best approach. It is what I could share with you. In Africa, for a very long time, NGOs and other organizations have been working very hard, but we need to actually promote change and have a strong influence in the decision-making process. And this needs to be clear to the NGOs. And this is going to change the way that the funding works, and it is going to lead to concrete changes. I would like to thank you on behalf of my organization. Thank you. Thank you, Baudouin. Now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker.
I think the good practice beyond the freedom of forking and the value alignment of the algorithm, I think the third important part is that all the community members partaking in the co-governance need to make sure that they are truly stakeholders. We have seen many platforms ostensibly open, as in transparent and participatory, but the requirement of participation is so high, the specialized knowledge required so much that it is virtually just a few people, maybe 5 people, 7 people, and most of them in the original founding team that can run this platform. And that, although if you look at the copyright license, if you look at the governing structure, it looks value aligned and it looks like anyone is able to fork on paper. It's not necessarily so in practice. So I think if we're making a decent work, especially around platform economies in a cooperative way, making sure that people can customize it without a lot of prerequisites training is very important. If we design our systems much like Lego blocks, such as the Sandstorm.io system that my office, I personally set it up for the office, the public digital innovation space, as well as anyone in the Taiwanese public sector to use. This allows anyone who come up with a small module, such as, I don't know, ordering lunchboxes together, to share the same cybersecurity, the same single sign-on, the same vetted way of trust of getting into a cybersecurity hardened sandbox and share it with everybody we work with without any surcharge or without any administration by professional administrators. So this is what people in the software world call as citizen developers. If we adopt software platforms and open hardware that can cultivate this idea of citizen developers and citizen science, then the maintenance of decent work across those open platforms are virtually guaranteed. If, on the other hand, only a few people understand exactly how the system works, and the system was designed in a monolithic way that is virtually impossible for people to remix, then even though you can fork, you can't change it much. Even though it's value aligned, when there's more people joining the collective and the multi-stakeholder panel and forum comes with an evolved set of values, then you will find that you're constrained by legacy software. And so just making sure that the modularity is as important as value alignment as well as the freedom to fork.
Thank you, Audrey. I would like to give the floor to Enrique. Remember that when the time is about to run out, you will see a message on screen so that everyone can participate. Okay, to answer the question about the best practices that organizations have in social and solidarity economy, I think that there are many good examples that can be shared. But to try to sum this up in 2 minutes, I would like to refer to 4 specific points. The first one is good practices, training and education. Some SSE organizations have created structures for years, like universities, academic institutions, among others. They have created platforms to provide training for people who work in these organizations. And these training efforts are always coordinated with organizations so that they know exactly what their needs are, both in the present and in the future. And of course, now it is necessary to channel all of those needs in the digital world. And there's also supply chains, productive supply chains and markets. We see that digitalization is being used in the social solidarity economy to strengthen productive chains in order to have access to new markets and have all the necessary elements to make a good value proposition. The third element are strategic partnerships. We are glad to see that there have been very good results of partnerships between organizations, because today digitalization allows for and promotes support, and solidarity from a productivity and efficiency perspective, which will allow for social and solidarity economy organizations to be stronger. And the fourth element is understanding, promoting understanding. This is something that I will try to explain a little more. We are now at a stage where digitalization is creating such a high level of data. So much data is available that we can't even understand it all. But the data that we have access to right now needs to be used to benefit people. It needs to be used by organizations for them to understand their local context and to better understand how the gaps and the economy, society, and all of the other areas that you can think of that are related to work can be bridged. And so that is how social and solidarity economy organizations could have access to that data. By having access to all that information, they could turn it into a better understanding of what their contribution to society can be to make it fairer and to make it thrive. As a conclusion, summing up these four elements, I believe that the best practice is effective long-term planning. I think that it is never too late to start concretely planning to overcome digitalization challenges. Digitalization will encompass many areas, and well, now we're specifically talking about work, but we need to include all of these 4 points in the planning process, which can be very useful to strengthen organizations. Thank you. Thank you, Enrique, and I will give the floor to Beatriz.
I think the social economy has an outstanding experience in combining a need for financial viability with a need for social inclusion in many different spheres and many different sectors with many different kinds of resources, and also of integrating different kinds of stakeholders. So one example in this field, we have a co-op, Eva Co-op, that is a competitor of Uber. But it integrates the consumers are members of the co-op, the drivers are members in another category. It's a multi-stakeholder co-op of the co-op, and the different co-ops, the one that's created in Montreal, the one that's created in Quebec City, are joined to support the macro, the platform, and to invest in making, for example, technological improvements. So I think these kinds of models that the social economy has been doing forever, that are innovative and inclusive, and that still aim for financial viability, are all the more essential today and age. And for that, I think we need to, specifically regarding digital advancements, we need to be, the challenge for the social economy ecosystem is how do we enable that these bigger projects in terms of infrastructure and in terms of impact and financing are harnessing adequate financing, have the appropriate technological knowledge, both the ones that are developing, but also possible projects. So people in different communities, how do they know the range of possible, what's out there, where to get help to develop these tools? And also, do they have access to subsidies in the same way that many other technological startups do? Oftentimes, tech startup hedge funds or government subsidies only finance Incs. So that de facto excludes enterprising nonprofits and co-ops, which are the basis of the social economy in Quebec. I think the other 2 points that I wanted to make is, one, the outstanding experience of the social economy in integrating people that are far from the labor market, because all of this will work and be inclusive if people are there at the decision table, are partaking in the benefits of this. And so we've seen all over the world the social economy work to integrate people with technical or physical limitations, but also to provide social infrastructure like daycare that allows people to be on the labor market in acceptable, decent conditions. And also we've seen experiences all over of fundamentally the social economy comes about because people come together to answer new needs or aspirations in innovative ways with the resources available. So I think it's the job of all of us that are looking at how to enable the social economy to facilitate the access to and the understanding of what those new resources are, so that communities are fully harnessing this capacity. And lastly, I think, again, drawing on this big experience of collective ownership and collective management, I think that there's a huge opportunity for the social economy around data, the management of data. Data is a fundamental collective good. It's generated by us, and it should be used for us, for whatever our community decides is a priority or is important under the conditions that we think are important. So we're seeing initiatives, legislation or initiatives on the ground to enable data trusts. There's also someone at MIT who was saying data should be under co-ops is the best form to do that. I think this notion, again, of multi-stakeholders ownership and of evaluating the pros and cons of an economic project, for example, to develop new medication or new service versus the social cost or impact, and how to put those two together is really fundamental. And I don't see anyone other than I see the social economy as being the best actor to do that, more than government and definitely more than private enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. Everything you have shared has been very important, including how the principles of social and solidarity economy are the basic ideal principles to face digitalization and to address digitalization in an inclusive fashion. Our speakers also mentioned that social and solidarity economy initiatives have had important success when creating innovative and inclusive models, especially when it comes to harnessing digitalization to create good practices for training. But there are also important challenges to face, such as how to create better understanding of data and data protection. At the beginning, someone said that the models of social and solidarity economy are the models that can best support human resource management in order to face the great challenges that we're facing today. And Botwan made a call to be agents for change, for transformation, and to have real weight when decisions are made in order to guarantee true change. Now we will go to our third and last round of questions. Our panelists will have 3 minutes each to answer, and this is GSEV's guiding question. How can we transform the present to build a better future with social and solidarity economy? I'll first give the floor to Oyane. Excuse me, I apologize. Turning the microphone on and off is a bit confusing, but I think you all hear me better right now. Thank you, Marisol. Let me try to answer the question you just asked about how we can change our present and build a better future through social and solidarity economy. We believe it's important to talk about 3 key concepts that we believe should be perfectly aligned and interconnected. First, it's intelligent or smart cities, digital equality, and digital commitments or principles to be respected. So when we talk about smart cities, many cities in the world, including Bilbao, have been working to design strategies and to create urban organizations that have digital tools that try to give assistance to our citizens. We have been working very intently to create an ecosystem that benefits our citizens based on technology, based on all the data that we have gathered, as has been mentioned throughout the plenary. And if we use the data correctly, if we take advantage of it, then we can close many gaps in our society and we can guarantee a better social integration in cities. There are still global challenges to be faced, including demographic growth, urban population density, improving access to public services offered to our population, and sustainability. Besides all of these challenges, there are new challenges that we have become aware of or that have become more visible in the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is healthcare and essential services. So it's important to stimulate the economy and guarantee growth, but only if we do it in an inclusive and sustainable fashion. We understand that a response will entail transforming our cities in order to guarantee that Bilbao and other cities become truly smart cities, and that above all, they guarantee social coexistence that promotes our values and that have kept the social fabric of our cities alive. So the strategy of digital equality in smart cities and in the ecosystems that will be created in the cities where social and solidarity economy businesses will be of the essence, we believe will lead to creating opportunities. But as opportunities are created, we will have to respect principles and make digital commitments to be inclusive and ethical. In the case of Bilbao, and this will be my last comment, there are 7 principles that we have adopted that should frame all of our activities as we build the smart city we want. First, that we have to be people-centered in all of our decisions. Second, that we should focus on inclusive design, considering all the diversity of our city. Privacy, inclusion, transparency, and sustainability are non-negotiable. And everything we do in this process of digitalization should be done guaranteeing responsibility. Bilbao, as a local government, will strengthen policies of social and solidarity economy that guarantee that our recovery from the health and economy crisis will be digital, but it should be done in a balanced and inclusive way. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Oyane. Next, we will hear from Baudouin. Thank you very much for your intervention. I was saying that in social and solidarity economy, cooperatives, and specifically workers' cooperatives, are important. We have seen that in Africa and specifically in Togo. We have a program for workers because we believe that there have been many negative impacts of digitalization, both in terms of quality of jobs, but also in terms of the environment. We do want to close the digital gap. And to do so, organizations based on social and solidarity economy can guarantee that transformations are made respecting people and our traditions. We are listening to what's being done in Spain, for instance, where efforts are being made to respect democracy, to train everyone. And I believe that theirs is a good example that we should follow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baudouin. Next, we will hear from Audrey.
So how would we make sure that the workers understand and is empowered when it comes to the value alignment, as well as the capacity of forking of the working platforms? I think what's important is in our education system, we need to switch from a literacy point of view when it comes to digital media to a competence point of view. whereas in the previous days of radio and television, it's just about one person speaking to many. Literacy was, of course, important back then. But nowadays, especially in Taiwan, where the broadband is a human right, anywhere in Taiwan, even on the top of Taiwan, almost 4,000 meters high, you are guaranteed to have 10 megabits per second both ways for just 15 euros a month. Otherwise, it's my fault. And so because of this, we more and more see our students, our next generation, as producers of media and producers of source code and data. And in this sense, they are workers already and need to understand the ethics, the impact their work may have on the society. For example, about the fact-checking, about journalistic integrity, and so on, because they are really the producers of both media and data. And so because of this, we made sure that, for example, when we're measuring the air quality using the air boxes, that's less than 100 euros per sensor. Each sensor installed in the balcony or in the school offers a concrete case for the students to understand what does it mean to be a joint data controller. What does it mean for the GDPR requirements as applied to data? What does it mean to join a distributed ledger and how to hold the ledger to account? And so this kind of preparation, especially on the earlier ages of education, I think this is a really good chance for the whole society to look at the landscape of sustainability, the landscape of community development, and see that each of us can participate, even just part-time, as a part-time fact-checker, as a part-time data contributor, and understand that in a liberal democracy, it's not just about uploading 3 bits of information every 4 years, which is called voting, by the way, but rather about day-to-day democracy and day-to-day solidarity when it comes to digitalization and upholding the good quality of life and good quality of decent work.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Next, we will hear from Enrique, please. Thank you very much, Marisol. So how can social and solidarity economy take advantage of the great opportunity ahead of us? First of all, it must be clear to us that digitalization is not an end, but rather a means to meet the goals that our model is after. If we consider that as a basic principle, communication will be essential in order to make good use of the opportunities we have. But of course, there are many elements that are outside our hands, such as infrastructure, the legal framework, and financing, which needs to come from the governments. In the context of COVID-19, where fiscal burden will be very high for governments, there will be a lot of restrictions and limitations, especially for developing countries. That will probably be a concern for us in the near future. So the aspects that we can take advantage of to guarantee the promotion of social and solidarity economy through digitalization is taking advantage of cultural elements and training. Firstly, organizations and their leaders must spend a lot of time understanding what digitalization is, how technology works, and what are the real opportunities to take advantage of these elements. Once we understand and identify the opportunities we have, the second step of planning will come into place. This will require a change inside organizations, but a change such as the one we require cannot happen in a year or two. It happens across many years, and it's a process that never ends and that requires constant efforts and interaction. Next, workers need to understand, and we need to help them understand and train them to work differently. Today, we see this with COVID-19. But the truth is that changes in the workplace have been happening for many years. Work is changing, and the most efficient organizations have understood this a very long time ago. So we have to understand what are these new ways of working and what sort of governance is required within organizations. That, of course, is a question for every organization to answer based on their own context, their own capabilities and realities. And thirdly, we need to consider value generation. Institutions of social and solidarity economy can be spearheads to promote technology. These institutions can develop the necessary technology for the rest of organizations that follow their lead. So we have to understand technology on two different levels. We have to understand the user level, what technology can we use to improve our work and the way we do our work? And second of all, what are the new technologies that will be created to help others do their work better? Now, something that we have all mentioned is that of data ownership. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area to have a clear definition of whose the data is. Data ownership presents an opportunity for us, but as other panelists have said, we need to reflect on the legal boundaries, how to figure out data ownership. Finally, we believe that in order for social and solidarity economy to take advantage of digitalization and improve the conditions of workers, it's very important to discuss the positive impacts that could come. Very few institutions are upholding good practices, but we believe that solidarity implies sharing those good practices, exchanging those good practices from a technical and operational standpoint. Good practices can be very useful if they are shared with other organizations. When new structures are being created, it's always best to follow the models of other successful stories. What we have seen is that institutions that have been successful and that continue to have success in digitalizing is by having an open innovation scheme where there's no ownership of the innovation, but they put it at the service of everyone, of workers and other organizations. Thank you. Thank you, Enrique. Now, finally, to end the panel, we will hear Beatrice.
So in Quebec, the Chantier has been identified 6 areas for the social economy to contribute to a better model as we manage the pandemic and what we're going to get out of it. I think governments and communities are putting huge efforts to manage this situation and to think about a better tomorrow. And I think we owe it to all of us to use this as an opportunity to do better. We need to get this right. And I think there's a certain consensus in Quebec that the social economy has a role to play, but how much and with what resources remains to be seen. It's not specifically about the digital transformation of work, but I would say all of these areas have a digital component in it. So one of them is the ecological transition. We know that our model is not sustainable. The social economy plays key roles in recuperating and reusing our waste and waste management. And there's a digital component to that that's very important, but also in dispatching and using our resources more efficiently. There's a project through artificial intelligence to use food surpluses and redistribute them better. The other areas, transformation of working conditions and of work. This pandemic has shown us that the importance to value differently certain jobs that we didn't value, that are undervalued. Everything around care and care for vulnerable people, whether children, old people particularly, are underpaid, undervalued. And this is exactly an example of something that is not so easy. You can have an automatic vacuum cleaner. That's not the same thing as someone who comes to your house and sees that you're okay and you're still mobile, etc. You can have an online recorded class. It's not the same thing as having access to a teacher. So there are limits to technological innovations or improvements. And I think this calls upon us to think about rethinking our working conditions and their impact of those choices, but also looking at sectors that were already fragile before the crisis and are being devastated by the crisis. So things like culture, leisure, news were already very fragile, and some of those sectors are shut down. What are we going to do when we restart? We can't just, it's not like a restaurant, it closes and then it reopens. Community organizations have skills so we need to think about these issues. Then the other issues that we're looking at is food autonomy. Again, there are several initiatives through digital innovation that support the social economy in there, and the social economy plays a huge role to ensure to reinforce food autonomy in our communities and to ensure food security. The quality of life of certain residents, so particularly elderly people in this crisis, has been a major issue. The model in which we enable the quality of life of older people in Quebec, it's not adequate, particularly for people with less resources or in smaller rural areas. Local purchasing, so the whole question of local transportation, identifying local businesses, but also enabling businesses to sell online or just commercialize online is a huge challenge. And collective infrastructure. If we're pouring money into building stuff or repairing stuff because that's an easy way to generate employment, or that's what governments have traditionally done, how do we enable that some of those projects are really for the collective good, or that the investments in those infrastructures have multiple effects through government market processes that support the social economy? But in that case, they need to identify them, they need to be able to access them, and those businesses need to be able to come together to answer government tenders, which tend to be larger and more complicated. So it's all issues where I think the digital advances are intertwined with very concrete needs on the ground to do better. Thank you.
Youssef Eloux is here to talk to us a little bit more about this video before we actually watch it. Youssef? Thank you very much. My name is Youssef Eloux. I'm the president of the Network of Initiative for Social and Solidarity Economy in Morocco. We are a team of young people who created a network that works to promote social and solidarity economy in the last 5 years. Our mission is to promote social and solidarity economy through solidarity innovation by creating new platforms, new projects in the cities and the regions. And for several years, we have become one of the strongest networks in the region, and specifically in Morocco, where we are based. Most of the young people, including myself, are researchers in social and solidarity economy. And the young people who are part of the network are working to manage mechanisms of social and solidarity economy. We encourage young people to participate in this sector in order to have new projects and new businesses of social and solidarity economy. Social and solidarity economy has many trade unions, cooperatives, and multiple stakeholders involved. In our region, there are several kinds of cooperatives for couscous, for production of regional products. We help our women to build their own projects, to promote local consumption and production of local products. in order to try to fight poverty amongst the population. We have a building where we can give attention, we can organize workshops, trainings, forums to train professionals and university students. We exchange knowledge and experiences with other countries like French. We have an exchange program of young people as well who can go to France. We have been learning a lot about social and solidarity economy. So it's a pleasure to be with you today because we will be implementing new practices in our region and particularly in our team to create systems to promote social and solidarity economy. This economy has been affected by COVID-19, and one of the solutions that we have tried to think of was through cooperatives, by merchandising local products, now through e-commerce as well. So we are currently working on several projects to promote digitalization, to create e-commerce solutions, especially for groups of women. Women empowerment is extremely important at an economic and social level. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for listening to me and giving me an opportunity to share our experience. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde, bonjour chers acteurs de l'économie sociale et solidaire. Le réseau Esprit d'initiative de l'économie sociale et solidaire est une organisation et une plateforme aussi de la promotion de l'économie sociale et solidaire au Maroc à travers la mise en place de nouvelles stratégies et des actions innovantes.
By creating a new strategy and innovative actions that break away from the traditional way of doing things in our country and our region. We have organized 50 activities, including workshops for capacity building, promoting self-entrepreneurship amongst our youth. The organization has offered a lot of training on green entrepreneurship, a support of youth entrepreneurs, women representation, participation in national and international meetings on social and solidarity economy, and we organized the first regional forum on social and solidarity economy and employment. Our network strengthened exchange through personal exchanges and receiving visits from international and national experts that helped us learn from other experiences. So please join our forum on social and solidarity economy.